The night of March 4, 2020, in Costa Rica, seemed like any other for Alison Bonilla, an 18-year-old with big dreams. However, that same night would become a nightmare for her family and friends. Alison disappeared without a trace, and what followed were months of anguish, intense investigations, and shocking revelations. How could a young woman full of life and plans simply disappear? And what drives someone to commit such a brutal and senseless crime? Alison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in Cartago, Costa Rica. Raised by her mother, Yendri Vasquez, after her father abandoned her, Alison developed an extremely close relationship with her. Alison also maintained strong ties with her extended family, including her grandmothers and her aunt, who helped raise her. From an early age, she dreamed of working in the fashion world, especially as a makeup artist. Determined to follow her dream, Alison dropped out of school and started taking makeup courses. Despite her financial difficulties, she was always described as cheerful, optimistic, and full of hope. She had many friends, a large family and a boyfriend, Harold Segura Solano, who lived in Cochi, about 20 kilometers from where Alison lived. On that fateful day in March, Alison followed her usual routine. She spent the afternoon with her mother, and then went to visit a friend, Paula, before going to school in the evening. When she arrived at school, Alison discovered that classes had been cancelled. With nothing else to do, she decided to visit her boyfriend, Harold, who lived near the school. They spent some time together, had dinner with Harold's family, and, just after 8 p.m., Alison decided to go home. Alison left Harold's house at 8:15 p.m. and went to the bus stop. During this time, she exchanged messages with her mother and Harold, informing them that she was being followed by two suspicious men. Despite her fear, Alison continued her journey and got off the bus at 20h43. However, she never arrived home. When Yendri realized that Alison hadn't returned, she panicked. She started calling family and friends, asking for help to find her. Within hours, Harold was also informed and tried to call Alison, but her phone was already switched off. The police were called and a large-scale search began. The authorities checked the route Alison would have taken from the bus stop to her home and examined several nearby areas, including coffee plantations and lakes. The next day, police found Alison's glasses about a kilometer from her home, but for some reason there was no further sign of the young woman. After weeks of searching, the police finally received a crucial clue. A man who knew Alison reported seeing a red BMW on the day of her disappearance, which seemed suspicious to him. The car belonged to 28-year-old Nelson Sanchez Urania, known locally as Sukia. Nelson was a member of a local gang and had a criminal past. He was also known to Alison and her family, but they never had a close relationship. 2 days before Alison's disappearance, Nelson had sent her a message on Facebook, asking if she liked him. Alison, surprised by the question, replied that she considered him a neighbor, but didn't have an opinion. Nelson then thanked her, and the conversation ended there. On September 2, 2020, after months of investigation and surveillance, the police finally found concrete evidence against Nelson. Traces of blood and hair belonging to Alison were found in his car. Pressured by the evidence, Nelson eventually confessed to the crime. He reported that, on the night of the disappearance, he saw Alison walking alone and decided to approach her. Alison got into Nelson's car, probably because she knew him and didn't suspect his intentions. However, instead of taking her home, Nelson took her to a coffee plantation, where he raped and brutally beat her. Nelson then took Alison to an isolated area in San Geronimo, Cochi, where he threw her body off a cliff. Even with Nelson's confession, the search for Alison's body was a long and difficult process. The area where he said he had dumped the body was vast and difficult to access. Only 25 days after the confession, police found human remains that were later confirmed as belonging to Alison Bonilla. In addition to the bones, Fragments of the clothes Alison was wearing on the day of her disappearance were found, as well as a shoe with bones in it. The discovery was a devastating blow for Alison's family, especially for Yendri, who held out hope that her daughter would be found alive. Throughout the time Alison was missing, Yendri kept her daughter's room untouched and bought her presents, believing that she would come home. Nelson Sanchez Urania was arrested and brought to trial, where he faced various charges, including kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. The case received widespread media coverage, and Nelson's conviction was widely expected by Costa Rican society. Despite his initial confession, Nelson later tried to back out, claiming that he had been coerced by the police. However, the evidence against him was irrefutable, and Nelson was sentenced to the maximum penalty of 35 years in prison. The case of Alison Bonilla left a deep mark on Costa Rican society. The brutality of the crime and the young age of the victim shocked the country, leading to discussions about public safety, violence against women, and the criminal justice system in Costa Rica. Alison's memory lives on, and her story serves as a painful reminder of the importance of fighting violence and protecting the most vulnerable in our society. If you're fascinated by true crime stories that reveal the darkest corners of human nature, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Stay tuned for more chilling cases, in-depth analysis, and the real stories behind the headlines.